What's up, everybody? Let me tell you about something that's been keeping me up at night for all the correct reasons. Silent Hill F just isn't another horror game trying to capitalize on nostalgia. This is a genuine masterpiece that proves the franchise can evolve while maintaining everything that made it legendary. After spending 5 intense hours exploring the fog-drenched streets of 1960s rural Japan, battling grotesque creatures, and unraveling one of the most psychologically complex narrative that I've ever encountered in years, I can confidently say that Taiwan-based developer Nekobart Entertainment has delivered something truly special here. If you're anything like myself, I love Bloober Team's incredible Silent Hill 2 remake from 2024. Then you're going to be absolutely blown away by what Nekobart has accomplished here. I know some of you might be worried, different developer, completely different setting, can it really capture the same magic? Trust me, everyone, I had the same concerns going in, but this game not only meets those expectations, it exceeds them in all the ways that I didn't think were possible. Look, I'm not easily impressed when it comes to horror games, to be honest, but the moment I took control of Hinako and began walking through the dense yet eerie deserted streets of Ebisugawa, I had to pause and honestly take it all in. I literally had to put down the controller for a moment because I was struck by how authentic everything felt. The fictional remote town nestled in the mountains of rural Japan during the 1960s isn't just a backdrop of horror events, it's a living, breathing character that tells its own story throughout every weathered building, every narrow alley, and every traditional detail meticulously crafted by the development team. They honestly did an amazing job. The immersive over-the-shoulder perspective combined with the complete absence of the UI elements during exploration creates an unprecedented level of immersion. There's no health bars cluttering your view. There's no minimap breaking that illusion at all. There's no consistent reminder that you're playing a video game like an idiot. Silent Hill F trusts you to be completely absorbed in this world, and that trust pays off in some spectacular fashion. As someone who's encountered countless games that attempt to capture the essence of Japanese culture, I can say without hesitation that Ebisugawa represents one of the most authentic and impressive contemporary Japanese townscapes ever created in gaming, hands down, period. This surpasses the beloved titles of the Persona series, Ghostwire Tokyo. In terms of sheer authenticity and attention to detail, the town itself feels lived in with a history that extends far beyond what we've seen on screen. Files and documents scattered throughout Ebisugawa reveals a rich backstory of a community that once felt flourished as its mining town during the economical heyday. Now, decades later, it seemed to have transformed into a largely forgotten village where time has seemed to stop and residents have just become trapped in traditional ways of thinking that borders on dangerous. This isolation has created a culture where tradition and healthcare methods are favored over modern medical science, where superstition rules over reason, where the local population has developed an almost cult-like devotion to Inari, a Shinto deity whose influence penetrates every aspect of daily life. These aren't just background details that's thrown in for flavor. There are inaugural components of Silent Hill F narrative that directly impacts the gameplay and character interaction. The genius of the setting becomes apparent when you realize how perfectly it serves the dual nature of Silent Hill F's gameplay experience. During the opening hours, as you guide the protagonist Hinako through quiet streets towards seamlessly innocent meetups at local candy store with her high school friends, the game itself feels like an expertly crafted walking simulator that reminisces titles like Everybody's Gone to Rapture or The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. I have to share this with you. There's something almost magical about the opening hours of Silent Hill F. You know that feeling when you start a new horror game and you're just kind of bracing yourself for the scares? Well, this game actually flips that expectation and actually does it in a really expert way. As I was guiding Hinako through the quiet streets towards what seemed like a normal meetup with friends at the local candy store, I found myself actually relaxing. The game has this meditative, almost therapeutic quality that reminds me of walking simulators like Everybody Gone to Rapture. And then it hits you, and I'm sure many of you will relate to this. That moment happens when you realize you've been completely fooled by the video game and you're walking along enjoying peaceful atmosphere when Hinako suddenly is holding an iron pipe, that iconic Silent Hill weapon. My heart rate immediately skipped because I knew something was about to change, and boy was I right. Ebisugawa traditional architecture becomes a perfect setting for a horror experience. That maze-like layout of narrow alleys, unexpected dead ends, and that staircase that seems to lead to nowhere creates that sense of disorientation that grows more pronounced as the supernatural elements begins to take hold. Doors left slightly ajar and windows that just hang open freelishly becomes invitations to a traditional Japanese floored houses where simple puzzles guard the pathway forward. But then something just always feels fundamentally wrong. Puzzle designs that respect your intelligence. One of the things that constantly impressed me throughout my playthrough was how thoughtfully the design puzzles. They were challenging enough to make you think, but they never resort to moon logic or completely obscure solutions. The hints are cleverly integrated into the environment and the documents you find along the way, but they don't just hand you answers on the silver platter. They make you work for it as they should. You spent $60. For example, how about that scarecrow puzzle? I'm standing in this misty rice field looking at these traditional scarecrows, and I need to figure out which direction to go. The solution ties directly into Haneko's childhood trauma about getting lost and being afraid of scarecrows. It's not just some random puzzle, it's a window into her psychological state that also serves a practical gameplay. But it was the puzzle inside the school that really tested me. Without spoiling anything, there's a sequence involving multiple locked rooms and the series of keys needed to be found in a specific order. What made it brilliant wasn't just the complexity of the puzzle itself, but how it gradually revealed information about the school's history and the connection border between the mystery of Ebisugawa. I found myself genuinely excited to find my next document or clue, not because it would help me progress, but because I was genuinely curious about what the story was being told. When the puzzle design can create that level of investment, you know the developers understand what they're doing. This approach to horror design reflects the psychological of scenario writer Rikishio 7, the legendary creator between the Higurashi When They Cry. Rikishio 7 has stated that Japanese horror as a subgenre doesn't really rely primarily on direct threats to the protagonist's life, but rather focuses on creating situations that feels fundamentally off. Moments that make you feel uncomfortable on visceral levels without necessarily understanding why. This psychologically spans every aspect of Silent Hill F's design. The horror doesn't just come from jump scares or gratuitous violence, though both are present and appropriate. Instead, it emerges from growing realization that something is terribly wrong here, that the people around you that you're interacting aren't quite what they seem, and that escape might be impossible. Character interactions that genuinely unsettled me. I need to talk about how effectively this game handles character, because this is where Silent Hill F really shows that psychological horror credentials. The conversations with Hanako and her friends start off completely normal and innocent. Typical teenage dialogue about school, relationship, that sort of stuff. But then there are these moments where someone will just say something that's just off and wrong. I remember the one conversation where we were discussing plans to leave the town, and one of the friends make this comment that feels really innocent at first, but then the more I thought about it, the more disturbing it became. And it's that kind of subtle wrongness that gets under your skin as you play, and it just stays there. You start to question where you misunderstood what they meant, or whether there's something truly evil and sinister happening. The voice acting deserves huge credit in this game, like immediate credit. The performances are naturalistic enough that when these unsettling moments happen, they feel really genuinely disturbing rather than just campy or over the top. The actors manage to convey something that's fundamentally wrong without really conveying what exactly might be evil. This certainly extends to Hanako herself. Throughout the carefully crafted puzzle sequences, we begin to understand more about her eternal state and her personal history. Particularly, that goes back to the misty rice field, where examining the scarecrows provides clues about which direction to travel. These puzzle connects directly to her childhood trauma, Haneko's memory of getting lost, and developing a phobia of scarecrows that continues to influence her real adult life. These connections between gameplay mechanics and character developments represent some of the most finest psychological storytelling that I've encountered in gaming. Every puzzle is really meaningful, every interaction serves a purpose, and every revelation adds another layer to an already complex psychological portrait. As far as my experience with combat, when fear becomes a strategy, let me tell you something about the first time I found myself in actual combat in Silent Hill F. I had been lulled into this false sense of security by the peaceful exploration for a while, and then suddenly I'm face to face with this evil, grotesque creature gripping that iron pipe like my life depends on it, because damn it, it did. The combat system in Silent Hill F represents a significant evolution from the previous entry. After hours of fighting various enemies, I can say it's both terrifying and very satisfying, more importantly. Like any other modern horror game that treats weapons as rare, precious resources, Silent Hill F scatters them throughout its world along other survival items. This creates an interesting dynamic where you're constantly evaluating your current loadout and making decisions about weapons to carry. Since Heineko can only carry 3 weapons at any given time, I'll be honest, I was kind of skeptical about the weapon durability system at first. I'm generally not a fan of weapons breaking in games, but here it actually made perfect sense and enhanced the horror experience. Watching my trusty iron pipe slowly bend and warp after each encounter, and seeing Heineko herself comment that she should probably find a way to fix that, these details made me genuinely attached to the weapons while also creating a constant underlying anxiety about being left defenseless and then a giant ass monster kills me. Repair kits exist because the incredibly scarce resources, which means you'll be frequently finding yourself saying bye-bye to weapons that you've grown attached to. While weapons degradation is often criticized in games as a necessary burden, it actually works brilliantly in Silent Hill F. The consistent need to find new weapons and manage resources become an integral part of the tension, especially when you won't be searching for ammunition this time around. The upgrade system adds another layer of strategic depth without overwhelming the core experience. At save points, you can convert surplus into an in-game currency that can be used to improve Heineko's stats or purchase amulets that have various buffs and abilities. This system rewards careful resources and management throughout exploration, giving players who take their time to search every corner an intangible advantage. Combat mechanics themselves feel really familiar, especially to anyone who plays Silent Hill 2 Remake, but with significant improvements and additions. Basic light and heavy attacks are mapped with the R1 and R2 respectively, while dodging is handled with the circle button. The limited reach and deliberately weighty feel of combat animations reinforce the fact that Heineko is an ordinary teenager, no combat training, not an action hero. Now let me talk about what really sets the combat apart: the focus mode and the counter attack system. I have to admit, I struggled with this at first. The timing window counter attacks are incredibly tight, and even though enemies telegraph their attacks, my reflexes just weren't fast enough initially. This is where the focus mode became my lifeline. Holding L2 slows everything down just enough to give you that critical extra moment to react, and then when you successfully pull off a counterattack, that satisfaction is immense. But here's what I really found clever about this system: focus mode just isn't a gameplay crutch, it's tied into Heineko's mental energy gauge, which creates a brilliant connection between the psychological horror elements and the combat mechanics. When something truly frightening happens, when Heineko gets scared by the enemy or a disturbing event, her maximum mental energy actually decreases. I found myself in these situations where I were desperately needing to use focus mode, but Heineko was too traumatized to maintain that concentration. I remember one particular encounter where I had gotten a little cocky after managing the basic combat. I was facing what seemed like just a fodder enemy when suddenly things did something that generally disturbed me, and I won't spoil it, but let me just say it defied my expectations of what creatures were capable of. Heineko mental energy just plummeted, and suddenly I couldn't use focus mode effectively anymore. I found myself frantically searching for items to restore her psychological state while trying to survive the encounter, which diminished her abilities. These systems forced me to think strategically about every encounter. Do I engage in these enemies and just risk depleting my mental resources, or do I just sneak past them? Since enemies don't drop valuable loot or give any experiences points, running away became often the smart choice. But sometimes you can't run at all. Sometimes you just need to stay there and fight to clear the area for safe exploration. These decisions felt very meaningful in a way that most horror games combat don't actually achieve. The brilliance of this approach becomes almost apparent during what initially appears to be a boss encounter early in the game. Rather than engaging in traditional combat, players must instead search for escape routes while managing their terror and exhaustion levels. It's a perfect example about how Silent Hill F changes player expectations while staying very true to the series' core philosophy. No Silent Hill game will be complete without a signature alternate reality, and Silent Hill F delivers one of the most visually striking and theme-appropriate other worlds in the series' history. While Heineko is transported to a parallel dimension, she finds herself in a more traditional version of Japan, where ancient shrines and classical architecture dominates the landscape. In this realm, a mysterious masked figure serves as a guide, leading Heineko through grounds of various religion sites. The Otherworld sequences provide access to traditional Japanese weapons like a nagatanga, a curved blade pole weapon historically crafted from female warriors. These weapons don't just suffer from durability issues like the real world counterparts, but they can be carried back to Ebisugawa when Hanako returns to normal reality. Let me tell you about the bosses that nearly broke me. I encountered this thing in the other world where I won't describe it in detail because the surprise is half the impact, but this creature tested every single combat skill that I learned up until that point. Its reach was insane. Its attack pattern seemed completely random at first. It had multiple phases that each required different strategies. I'm not exaggerating when I say this boss took me nearly an hour to defeat. I died repeatedly, and each time I learned something new about its behavioral patterns. The long reach meant that I had to time my approaches perfectly. The unpredictable attacks forced me to stay consistently mobile. The multiple phases meant that just when I thought I had it figured out, everything was flipped upside down and changed. But here's the thing, and it never felt unfair. Every death taught me something valuable. Every attempt brought me closer to understanding that encounter. When I finally landed that killing blow, that sense of accomplishment was incredible. I actually stood up and cheered for a little bit. That's exactly the kind of boss design that modern games need more of. Challenging but very fair, complex but learnable. The learning curve is steep but fair, reminiscent of modern action games without fully embracing the punishing difficulty of Souls-like experiences. Series producer has actually acknowledged that Silent Hill F combat was influenced by the current popularity of challenging action games, though he carefully to note that this game isn't attempting to be a Souls-like. Instead, it burrows that satisfying learning curve that makes every victory feels very genuinely earned. The later portion of the preview build takes place in the side of a school, representing Silent Hill F's approach to the series' traditional indoor facility exploration. Like the apartment buildings, the hospitals, the hotels of previous games, the school functions as a self-contained dungeon with its own internal logic and progression system. Upon entering, Hanako obtains a detailed map of the building, which becomes essential for navigation through the complex layout of classrooms, hallways, and multiple floors. True to the series tradition, Hanako proves to be a very meticulous note-taker, automatically marking locked doors, discovering passages, and other important information directly on the map. The school sequences require players to solve multiple interconnected puzzles while managing encounters while various enemies and finding keys to access different areas of the building. It's a classic Silent Hill formula executed with modern sensibilities and technical polish. According to series producer, Silent Hill F is designed to provide approximately 12 to 13 hours of gameplay. That suggests that the 5-hour preview represents roughly 1/3 of the complete experience. If this pacing continues throughout the full game, the balance between open door town exploration and indoor facility investigation should address one of the few criticisms that levels that the Silent Hill 2 remake had. Like many entries in the Silent Hill franchise, Silent Hill F features multiple endings, including the very famous UFO ending that the series fans are very welcome to expect. While the preview build maintained a largely linear structure, the presence of multiple conclusions suggests that the player choices and thoroughness of exploration will impact the final narrative outcome. This commitment to replayability extends the value proposition significantly, encouraging players to return and explore different decision paths or search for secrets and story elements they might have missed during their initial playthrough. The return of the legendary composer Akira Yamaoka represents Silent Hill's F's most significant connection to the series' heritage. Yamaoka, who has been a defining force in the Silent Hill music for over 25 years, brings his expertise and crafts to the chilling soundscapes of the game's fogged world. His haunting melodies and atmospheric audio designs continue to set the standards for horror gaming music. Working alongside Akioka is composer Kinsuke Inoue, who takes responsibility for the music in the game's Otherworld sequences. This collaboration creates a unique, arbitrary contrast between the two-dimensional states, with each realm having its own distinct musical identity that reinforces the psychological and thematic differences between realities. The audio design extends beyond the music to encompass every aspect of the game's sounds landscape. Environmental audio, character voice work, and the sound effects all work together to create an immersive experience that keeps the player consistently on edge. The subtle use of audio cues to build tension and telegraph danger represents some of the finest sound design work in contemporary gaming horror. the emotional impact, and why this game stays with you for so long. I wanted to share something personal with you about how this game affected me. Days after finishing my playthrough session, I kept thinking about Ebisugawa. I'd be going about my daily routine, and then suddenly I just think back of the imagery of the misty rice fields, the sound of cicadas in the distance. That's when I knew this game really had gotten me in the best possible way. You know, in some horror games, when they try to shock you with gore, loudness, and then you forget about all of that the moment you turn off your console, Silent Hill F is kind of the opposite. It creates this lingering sense of unease that stays with you throughout your gameplay and long after you finished it. I found myself questioning things that I normally wouldn't think about twice, like why would someone say a particular phrase, or why the shadow in my peripheral vision might be there. That's the mark of a truly sophisticated horror design. It doesn't just scare you into the moment, it changes how you see the world for days after. And honestly, that's both impressive and very unsettling. The game creates this sense of unease that builds so gradually you don't even realize how deep it has gotten under your skin until you're already trapped. Early in the game, walking through the peaceful town felt almost like just a meditation. By the end of my session, I was jumping at the shadows every second, guessing every decision. That transformation happens so naturally, you can't just pinpoint exactly when things shifted from peaceful to terrifying. I also need to praise this game's restraint. In an era where many horror games rely on just cheap jump scares and excessive gore, Silent Hill F just trusts in psychological horror techniques that are much more difficult to execute. The most frightening moments often involve nothing more than just a subtle change in the atmosphere or a character saying something that just feels so dang creepy. It's so sophisticated horror that just respects your intelligence as a player. From a technical standpoint, Silent Hill F is impressive across the board. The visual fidelity is consistently excellent. That particular attention paid to environmental details that reinforce the 1960s settings, character models and animation feel supernatural and believable, which is crucial in a game that depends so heavily on character interaction and psychological realism. But what really impressed me was how the technical elements serve the horror design. The lighting systems create constantly shifting shadows that keep you uncertain about what you might encounter. The audio design layers environmental sounds, character dialogue, and Akira's masterful soundtrack into the most cohesive soundscape that enhances every moment in gameplay. Loading times are very minimal, which maintains immersion during crucial story moments. I never found myself pulled out of the experience by technical issues or performance problems, which is huge in my book. The game runs super smoothly and looks fantastic, which allows you to focus entirely on the horror experience that the developers has created. Writer Rikishu has commented that Silent Hill F explores themes designed to provoke discomfort rooted in emotional and personal trauma, which aligns perfectly with the series' traditional approach to psychological horror. That integration of gameplay mechanics with narrative themes that creates a coherence of experiences where every element serves the larger story being told. The 1960s Japanese settings isn't just aesthetic windows dressing. It's important to understand the social and cultural forces that shape both the town of Ebisugawa and its inhabitants. The tension between traditional values and modernizing influences, that the isolation ruled communities, and the weight of cultural expectations all contribute to the psychological landscape that makes the horror elements feel organic and inevitable. The story follows high school student Hinako as she faces a reality warped by supernatural forces, trauma framed by a narrative that intertwines beauty and decay. That thematic approach allows Silent Hill F to explore complex psychological territory while maintaining the series' commitment to genuinely frightening horror experiences. Cultural authenticity and respect is here. One of Silent Hill's most impressive achievements is how it handles its Japanese cultural setting with genuine respect and authenticity. Rather than just relying on surface level stereotypes or erotic imagery, the game demonstrates a deep understanding of Japanese rural culture, traditional religious practices, and social dynamics. The portrayal of Shinto religious elements, traditional architecture, and period approachable social structures feel very researched and respectful rather than just explorative. This cultural authenticity adds significant weight to the horror elements, making the supernatural intrusive feel way more threatening because they're violating a world that feels real and lived in. Silent Hill F offers separate difficulty settings for both combat and puzzles, allowing players to customize their experience based on personal preferences and skill levels. The puzzle difficulty never becomes overwhelming, with environmental clues and collective documents providing helpful guidance without making solutions too obvious. Combat difficulties prevents a more significant challenge, particularly for players who choose normal or higher difficulty levels. The bosses encounters in particular require patience, patterns, recognition, and effective resource management. However, the learning curve again felt very fair, with failure typically resulting from tactical mistakes rather than unfair gameplay design. The inclusion of difficulty option ensures that Silent Hill F can accommodate different types of players while maintaining its core identity as a challenge survival horror experience. Performance and platform considerations. Silent Hill F is scheduled on release on PlayStation 5, Windows, and Xbox Series S and S on September 25th, 2025, taking full advantage of current gen console capabilities. The game's visual and technical performance suggests that it's been developed significantly for these platforms rather than just being constrained by legacy hardware considerations. Loading times are very minimal, again allowing seamless transitions between different areas and maintaining immersion during critical story moments. The game's technical stability throughout the preview build suggests that its development team has prioritized polished optimization. Early review impressions suggest that Silent Hill F successfully reinvents the series without alienating longtime fans. Critics have noticed the effectiveness of the new combat mechanics and have highlighted the game's particularly gory, intense horror elements. The combination of Rikishi's psychological horror expertise, Nekobar's entertainment technical capabilities, and Akira Yamaoka's musical masteries appears to have created something that honors the Silent Hill legacies while pushing the franchise in a new exciting direction. Let me be completely honest with you with my experience with Silent Hill F. Going into this game, I had very high expectations after how much I love Silent Hill 2 Remake, but I also had some concerns. Could a completely different developer capture what makes Silent Hill special? Would Japanese settings feel authentic or like cultural tourism? After completing my 5-hour preview, I can definitely say not only did Nekobar Entertainment meet my expectations, they exceeded them in all the ways. The first thing that struck me was how confident the game felt. There was no sense that developers were trying to play it safe or simply copy what worked before. From the moment Hanako starts walking those empty streets, you feel that the team hints that they understood the assignment on a fundamental level. Repeat that. They weren't just making a Silent Hill game, they were making their Silent Hill game, and that distinction makes all the difference. But let me talk about some of the areas where the game isn't perfect, because no game ever is. The difficulty balance, particularly in combat, can feel punishing if you're not prepared for it. I chose normal mode for both combat and puzzles against developers' recommendations to play on story mode, and I definitely paid for that stubborn decision. Some players might find the boss encounters frustratingly difficult, especially if they're coming from a more forgiving Silent Hill 2 Remake. The weapon durability system, while thematically appropriate, might annoy players who prefer not to constantly manage their equipment. I find myself occasionally frustrated when a weapon I had grown to attach to broke at an opportune moment. However, I have to emphasize that this frustration felt intentional and contributed to the overall sense of vulnerability that makes this horror more effective. The 1960s Japanese settings provides a perfect backdrop for psychological horror, while the combat and exploration system offered enough depth to keep players engaged throughout the 12 to 13 hour campaign. The multiple ending system and throughout the world building encourage replay and careful exploration. Silent Hill F represents exactly what modern Silent Hill games should be: respectful of the series' heritage while bold enough to chart new creative territory. If you enjoy Silent Hill 2 Remake or have any interest in psychological horror gaming, Silent Hill F deserves that place on top of your must playlist. The game's commitment to atmospheric horror over cheap scares and its innovative approach to combat mechanics and its respectful handling of Japanese cultural elements combine to create an experience that feels both familiar and revolutionary. This is horror gaming at its finest, and it sets a new standard for what psychological horror can achieve in current gaming landscape. For longtime Silent Hill fans, this represents a triumphant return to form that proves the franchise can continue to evolve and surprise us. For newcomers, it's a perfect entry point to one of the gaming's most important horror series. Before I wrap this up, I want to be completely transparent with you why I think this game matters. We live in an era where so many horror games feel like it's just a checkboxes, jump scares here, gore there, generic monster designs everywhere. Silent Hill F feels different. It feels like it was made up by people who understand the best horror comes from psychological and not shock value. If you're someone who truly appreciates games that trust your intelligence, if you enjoy Silent Hill 2 Remake, or if you're looking just for a horror experience that sticks with you for long after you finish the title, then Silent Hill F absolutely deserves your attention. When it released on September 12, 2025 for PlayStation, Xbox Series, and PC, it has the potential to become not just one of the game's best horror games, but one of the finest games released in any genre. I rarely say this about games, especially horror games, but Silent Hill F is something very special. It proves that psychological horror isn't dead. The developers can still create experiences that genuinely unsettles us without restoring cheap tricks. The fog is lifting, but the nightmares are just beginning, and I couldn't be more excited for you to experience them yourselves. That's going to wrap this up for this comprehensive look at Silent Hill F. After spending an intensive time with what I truly believe is genuinely one of the finest horror games ever created, I can say without hesitation that this is an essential playing for anyone who's interested. The game succeeds in creating a fresh Silent Hill experience that maintains this franchise's core identity while exploring new thematic territory and gameplay possibilities. So that's going to wrap this up. If you want to catch me live, link is in the bio for my Twitch channel. But until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and stay out.